My dears, welcome. And welcome to a celebration that is very personal to me. The celebration of the publishing and printing of this amazing little book. The Keeping Quilt literally chronicles the arrival of my mother's family to this country all the way up into modern times, which is today. One thing, though, that is interesting to me in my peregrinations around to do schools and in this country, I think many of you aren't aware that so many copies of the Keeping Quilt exists. There have been 3 publishings, 3 printings. The first was this one, sepia toned. The artwork in it is sepia toned. By that I mean the paper is kind of brown, the ink is brown. It ends literally with the birth of my first child, my little girl, which is on the very last page. So this was the first book that came out, won the Sidney Taylor Award, which I'm very, very proud of. And then 10 years later, we literally did another version of the book. It is the same book essentially, except you'll notice it's crisper and whiter. They decided to do a white background. The inks in this are black, very, very dark. Essentially exactly the same, except it ends at when my 2 children have grown up, and it's actually chronicled my mother's death and you know, huge family events. But this is when my children grew up. That is the last page of the 10th anniversary edition. And then I want to say for the 25th anniversary edition, which was what, 15 years after this one, the book is thicker, again, very stark white backgrounds. The inks are very dark, but this chronicles the weddings of my children. This chronicles literally that I go around and do schools and take the quilt with me. Where this book ends, though, that is essentially different, is the birth then of my first grandbaby, a beautiful little boy that my son and his wife gave birth to, and it's on the very kind of last page of the 25th edition. The 25th edition also talks about the original quilt being at the Mazza Museum at the University of Findlay in Findlay, Ohio. The original quilt, 127 years. It finally, to protect it because it was falling apart, I donated it on permanent loan to the Mazza Museum at the University of Findlay in Findlay, Ohio. Dr. Benjamin Sapp is the curator of that museum, and he is taking brilliant and wonderful care of it. Since this book, though, I have had another grandbaby, a little girl, my little grandson's, his baby sister, held her in the quilt, and we always hold the babies in the quilt so their skin is next to Anna's heart here, because this is one of the last pieces of her garment that we moved off from the old quilt onto this new one. This is a replica, but this is the one I take around to schools. It's worked in my family for the last 22 years as the Keeping Quilt. I think sometimes young people see it and go, wait a minute, that's not the old one, so that can't be the real one. And my answer is, oh yes it is, this is the real one, but it's the newer version. This is the 2nd edition. But what I'm proudest of, and this is why I'm even talking to you about this book today, I don't know, I also did a book called The Blessing Cup. It was actually a prequel to the Keeping Quilt, but I wrote it and drew it almost 30 years later. It'll look like it's exactly the same art, and it is, but this is how my mother's family actually left Russia. This is after we got here, this. And what I'm proudest of, I think, is not only the accomplishment of putting these wonderful people that I loved so much on the pages of a book and chronicling their lives, but it has resonated so completely with the fabric of this country. Thousands upon thousands of people own copies of this book. It doesn't matter what religion they are, it doesn't matter what persuasion they are, the book resonates because it's talking about coming home. It's talking about babies being born. It's talking about weddings. It's talking about families gathering together, having wonderful food. I mean, that's what this is about. The other thing that I'm proud of, I have to tell you, my clock is going to chime now. We didn't turn it off because it's too late. I have done many, many book signings, and sometimes when I visit schools, a teacher will be there with her baby, you know, a teacher on leave for maternity leave, and when she shows up with a baby, the last thing I do for the children is show them the quilt. Well, then I will pick the baby up and hold it in the quilt. And everybody takes pictures and we cry and ooh and ah, because it's like a piece of ancient history that is now wrapped around a new little life. But here's the beauty, folks. I have lived long enough now. This book has been out long enough that I've actually been to book signings, and a young woman will come up to me with a baby on her own hip, and she'll say, Patricia, I have something to show you. She'll take out a photo and she hold it up in my face, and she'll say, I was that baby you held in the quilt, and now I have a baby of my own. Could you hold my baby in the quilt so I could take a picture? And I have. Can you imagine? So, absolutely amazing. We're coming on now to the 30th anniversary. I'm not quite sure what is intended for it. I mean, we've even talked about manufacturing a quilt very much like this and making it available to the public, or, and you see my cats enjoy it. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to do another version of this book. I do know this. I've talked to my children about this. Upon my death, they are going to do the last chapters of the very last book. It'll be their drawings and their thoughts and their goodbye to their mother. But again, this is something that is so unique and special, that has resonated with the hearts of everyone in this country, and I thank you for this. It means so much to me to think that this simple little story has captured your hearts and your souls, and that you can celebrate this with me. 30 years, my dears, 30 years. I can't even believe I'm saying that to you. 30 years. Thank you. Thank you for loving this book as much as it warms my heart for doing it and presenting it to you. Thank you.